Hey guys, thanks so much and welcome to the Game Your Future podcast. I'm Daniel, here to help you guys get the impact and the income you're looking for as gamers, leveling up your life. It's helping you as gamers really realize your full potential. And with that, I have some help here today. This is Betty, who also goes by Yukio Najima, online also on Twitch as well. And she is here to help you guys learn a little bit about crazy good skills that you can learn as gamers. She is a military education director for the Navy, right, I believe, and is also a student herself, working to get a marriage and family therapist license, and of course is a gamer. So, Betty, thank you so much and welcome. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me here, Daniel. It's a privilege and an honor to be here in your podcast.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So I'd love to start out just with our guests, just to understand kind of the gamer background, the gamer journey. When did you start? What kind of games do you enjoy? Just tell us what it is that you love about gaming too.
So, gaming has been a part of my life as young as I could remember. My parents were actually immigrants here to the United States, and being in the United States and being literally pulled into the culture of gaming and electronics was huge back in the 80s and 90s. So I remember one night, my father came up with the Nintendo Entertainment System, and he plopped it on top of the TV. He couldn't figure it out, and he just kind of left it there. Being the curious child that I've always been, and just a curious person in general, I remember kind of looking at it and plugging it in. Before you knew it, that I remember the cartridge just like it would be on a VCR, plugging it in, pushing it in, pressing the power button, and before you know it, we were playing Super Mario Brothers. Which is funny because the Super Mario Brothers we had was actually the combination of three. It came with an actual gamepad, so we were able to actually do the whole gym with the little it was a little
Yeah, the
just a
trackpad.
running
Yeah, I
the
remember that.
trackpad.
Yeah, those.
Yeah.
It was the
And
one
it
that
came
had
with the
Mario, it had Duck Hunt,
Mario
and the
and
track and field.
Olympics, track and field Olympics. And so I remember just having to have to pick which one it was, and then we had the gun. So before you know it, my dad comes down the hall and he's seeing us, me and my little brother, and my other little brother hadn't been born yet, but me and my little brother, I was only like 4 years old. We were both playing on this console. We were just kind of hanging out and just playing, and we were losing, and we were just kind of laughing. And my dad was completely taken back. He's like, "Oh, so that's what that is." And unbeknownst to us, apparently an uncle of ours actually bought the console, used the whole pocket, the whole whole bundle, didn't even know what he had bought, and didn't want it, gave it to my dad because he knew he had kids. And before you know it, we were already playing Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, and track and field.
So he bought it not knowing what it was. He thought it'd just be interesting or to hook it up to the TV and something would happen, right?
Yeah. He literally just popped it up on top. I remember we had a really big kind of like those furniture TVs, and he just kind of popped it up on the top, and he was trying to figure out, looking at all the cables, he just kind of gave up and left it there. But it was me who ended up getting in there and just really putting it in. And initially, even my two brothers have always mentioned, like, oh my God, like if it wouldn't have been for you, we all wouldn't have been such huge gamers. And I give that myself that honor and that privilege. I was like, yeah, I guess so. I was just curious what it was.
That's awesome. And just like from the get-go, right? Just that curious spirit, just to be able to like, how does this thing work? And just being able to, wow, just like without any instruction or just anything, you just figured out how to hook up the Nintendo just initially. And for those that don't know, back in the day, it was definitely much more than just plug in the HDMI cable because that
Oh
didn't
yeah.
exist back then.
No, it was kind of like the UHF kind of like connectors that had the little
Yeah.
things. And I remember just kind of putting it in there and then just kind of putting, and I remember reading it saying channel three. And I was like clicking it and putting it on channel three and then connecting it on there and just putting the power supply. And that was it. But for me, it seemed simple. But to my
Yeah.
dad didn't know what he was doing. So
That's fun, and that's what's actually really fun, I think, about gamers is that just that the inquisitive spirit and just the ability to kind of problem solve or just kind of like figure things out that we just inherently do that anyway, right? And that so would you say that
absolutely.
that's kind of carried with you throughout your life?
Absolutely. I think that initially curiosity has always been one of the foundations for me to be able to carry on even on my career, right? So learning has been a huge part of my whole life, and this is why I ended up leaning into academics and becoming a teacher. So the reason I am a military education program director is because I actually taught preschool, and I've taught many other after school programs for many, many years. because I have such a huge background in academia, I ended up landing the military education work for university and being able to actually create a program in which now active duty veterans and dependents can come in and be able to start their journey on a university level. However, even with that being said, I never stopped learning and I love to learn. And I always wanted to know more about just the mind and psychology. So I have an associate's in psychology. And that's, I think, one of the biggest takeaways from curiosity comes into therapies, psychology and everything else that comes with it. Learning about how we navigate just problem solving, how we're so resilient, and how many times do we not see that in stories? We see it in so much like The Last of Us, and we see it in so many other like really really fundamental, taking away Final Fantasy VII is so many games that really gives us that story base of resilience, of being able to do the best, right, of what you can. And that also was something that was really embedded. Storytelling was huge for me. So from my take, one of the biggest things that I enjoy about video gaming is because of the storytelling and the fact that I was able to just engage. So I think we all can say that we love a really good story. We watch movies or we read a really good book. But the fact that you get to engage and have an impact in the video game and being able to achieve it with along the character is probably the biggest thing for myself. So it just
That is
goes hand in
huge.
hand.
That is absolutely huge
Absolutely.
because it's that level of engagement that I think that again for the I'll call it the lay people, the non-gamers that just don't understand that level of engagement that you have where you get to immerse yourself in the story, much more I'll say much more viscerally than just say like a movie or a book. Right, where it's kind of the one-sided, like you're reading what's happening or you're watching the movie, like this is what the characters are doing, whereas in the game you influence what the characters do. Now, and I say it almost doesn't matter whether it's whether it's on rails, I'll say, versus like a little more choose your own adventure kind of thing. You're still in control. So you're making the things happen when they happen. And so there's that level of engagement and you're absolutely right. The level of like achievement, the level of satisfaction you get from kind of overcoming obstacles, you yourself as the character that you're placing yourself in there is just absolutely huge. And just we as gamers just get so much joy, so much satisfaction out of that as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I definitely have to agree. I think in that same sense, that's the reason why trophy hunting and achieving and completing a video game is so huge in the video game community. We know how that feels in order. It's the same thing. I see it as athleticism, once you achieve actually running a marathon or having to, win the big game, it's the same kind of, just kind of dopamine hit that we get. We're like, yes, we freaking, especially when you've been struggling, especially with soul games, which by the way, they can get pretty challenging.
Yep.
And when you finally complete it, it's a whole new level just because it's the pattern, you learn how to do it. And when you realize that it's something that you're able to accomplish, it just seems unbelievably unbeatable moving forward. You're like, I'm ready for the next game. Let's go for it.
Exactly right. So that level of sense of achievement is just something that I think everybody wants, right? Everybody inherently like needs is that level of achievement or progress, that level of satisfaction that they're looking for. And it's I'll say it's so easy. It feels like to get it through games. And it's one of the things that I think we understand that inherently. It's like, okay, well, games equal progress. And then the skills that we're developing as a result is actually something that we can take with us outside of the games, right?
Absolutely.
And so I
Go
wanted
ahead.
to
I'm
say,
so sorry.
so especially as your experience with both the teaching and as the yeah, director at the within the military for the academia, uh, where have you seen those skills, I guess, manifest, right, outside of the gaming, most prevalently?
Well, absolutely. So, just in my own field, problem solving is always one of the biggest things that I need to obtain in order for me to be able to, navigate the program. In many cases, unfortunately, for example, budget cuts or anything of that nature are a huge factor when it comes to being in my role. Not only that, but also navigating and multitasking several things, phone calls, and having to go ahead and deal with a lot of students that may have questions or, leadership. I think that video gaming for me, especially when I have I don't stop, right? So I always find an outlet. It's something that I'm very resilient about. So if there's something that doesn't end up resulting and somebody says, we don't know what to do with this, it's kind of giving me the opportunity to think outside of the box. I'm like, wait, hold on. So we're approaching it from this way. I understand that that's the way we're doing usually things, or that's how we're used to doing things. What would it look like to go on the ladder on this problem? And I think it just comes in as just as a gamer itself, because you may think that you're doing the right thing. You may think that you've got the pattern down, but there's something you're missing. And it gives you the opportunity to think through, take a step back and say, okay, let me regress, let me collect myself. And what am I not seeing that I need to go ahead and resolve? And before you know it, you're able to solve it differently. Right. So I think that those kind of skills also allow me to think outside of the box because I am a gamer. Not only that, but it also gives me the fundamental skills to be just a leader. I'm used to being in control. I'm used to kind of like navigating what needs to happen. And so I don't have a problem stepping forward and being like, wait, hold on, I have an opinion, or I have feedback for this particular situation, problem, or scenario. And I think that that ultimately has also helped me be a little bit more outspoken about things that I see and help and in my own personal career.
I love that. That's so many good skills that you mentioned here, and would love to kind of dive in a little bit more on some of these because I think leadership huge, absolutely
Hmm.
massive. That's something that I've definitely learned myself over time. That's just been one of the best skills, for me personally, and just being able and leadership is not just leading of people. Right. It's definitely bigger, it's broader, more encompassing, and a lot of it is these kind of like little, I'll call them add-on skills that kind of support the leadership. And one that you mentioned, because when you mentioned budget cuts, I think a lot of us are understand that things happen. It's like, all right, do more with less, and you're like, what?
Hmm.
Like, okay, but as gamers, that's kind of what we can do, right? Because it's that level of resource management as a skill, right? So there's a lot of games where
Absolutely.
that's kind of the whole point of the game, where it's just like, especially those kind of builder or tycoon games. It's like, all right, you have limited funds or resources, build the town, build the roller coaster, whatever it is. Uh, so being able to work within a finite amount of resources is one thing, and then even in the adventure games where you have to get some kind of a currency or some kind of money, and it's like, all right, what are you going to spend it on? Like, do I need the weapons? Do I need the armor? Do I need the skills? Can I buy skill books or whatever? There's all sorts of things. And being able to understand where the resources are needed, right, is I think key to these some of these leadership skills too, where it's like I need to make sure that my team performs at their utmost, which means I need to make sure I'm getting them the resources and the supplies to actually do that. Right.
I completely agree with you 100%. And not only does it also inquire for us to, like you said, time management, be able to be, resourceful with the things that we have, because sometimes we get things from particular, quest or something that we're supposed to be doing on the video game, and we don't have control over that. And we kind of let go a little bit and just go with whatever we have. I think I mentioned earlier The Last of Us, but I think that particular game made such an impact for me because when I realized that, wait, what? I only have one of those and that's all I have. And making a mistake didn't seem so scary anymore because at least I knew that I had that one thing and I knew that if I used it, that was it and it was survival at that point, right? So not only that, but it also kind of also opens the door for teaching because ultimately, I mean, I also play multiplayer games. I like to play Final Fantasy 14. And as an MMORPG, we know that you have to work together and you have to become a team. And but in some cases, some people really don't know either the acronyms of what's going on or even just a kind of pattern or just kind of the mechanics of the game. And sometimes it is within our realm, which we have a lot of experience, or the senior or the veterans of the game, to then pass down those kind of teachings and pass down those kind of opportunities saying, hey, FYI, because you are a DPS, you might want to step on this side, or because you are a healer, or because you are a tank, you may want to, shift the enemy on that side. And with just kindness and just patience also gives us a little bit more patience.
Mhm.
Has also been one of the qualities and skill sets that I've been able to obtain just being by a gamer, also as a leader and a director in my own field.
Patience is so key. There's so many. Because a lot of the times, I've noticed this also outside of gaming too, where you want to have patience for people because people are learning, right? You can't assume that everyone's at the exact same level you are, especially if they're just starting out. Like I think there's kind of a misunderstanding or just kind of a level of assumption that maybe sometimes we have as gamers. Like it's like, hey, you go through this and you hit this button, you do this level of whatever do this mechanic, and it's like, why aren't you doing it? It's like, well, now, hold on. This is their first time you've done it. You've done it like 20 times. Like this is their first time seeing it. Like, give them a little bit of patience to be like, okay, they'll figure it out. Just give them a little bit of space. And I know sometimes people get a little impatient there. So I think that's definitely a first thing and I love that you have that as far as being able to understand and kind of give that grace and that patience to say like, hey, people learn and you just got to give them a little bit of space to do that. Um, and
Absolutely.
I wanted to go back to also the other one of the other skills that you mentioned. I think is so huge around the problem solving, and especially the pushing the boundaries. And I'm trying to think if you said that or if that was my words, but basically what you were saying as far as like working within the system, but basically getting the most out that you can. Because I think as gamers, again, it's here's kind of how the developer intended it to happen, but you're like, but what can I do, right? And
Right.
what can I do to push it or to the point of breaking it to get what I want? Because gamers, we love doing that. We love having fun just to see how far we can get with what we have, right? And it's just that level of resourcefulness, I think, is a very key skill outside of the gaming as well, right? So we talked a little bit about
Absolutely.
resource management as far as using what you have, but this like, but can I go find what I don't? It's kind of the other.
It kind of gives you an opportunity to step back because even though you can push it, right? You most likely you'll lose or you'll come back outside and like game over. And then it gives you an opportunity to pick yourself back up, rebuild, and reassess. And that's something that we don't get that kind of experience anywhere else. I mean, imagine having to make a mistake in a relationship or anything like sometimes those are deal breakers for people and you don't get that opportunity back. Video gaming gives you an opportunity to make that mistake with very minimal risks. I mean, what's going to happen? You go into Minecraft, you lose all your crap, and then you're like, well, I guess I'm going to have to farm again and have to go get all these other things, right? But it's not as as huge as it would be if you were be doing it in real life with somebody else, right? So it kind of gives you an opportunity to be a little bit more. More mindful and just be more resourceful, like you mentioned previously, with what you have, and then realize that, hey, I can come back to this later on, but if I push the notion and if I know that this is something that's risky, well, there's not much that I get to lose. It kind of again puts you outside of the box for a little bit. It allows you to build some sense of resilience in its own way.
Yeah. And one of the questions that I've seen, a few times, and I wanted to ask you, as far as, having that understanding that, you might have to push a little bit, but then you might fail. But in games, you fail, who cares? Or reload, reset, or try again, doesn't matter. There's not real world consequences. But
Mhm.
when you get into life, suddenly there are. And what have you noticed for yourself, or what kind of advice would you have for people that maybe are just scared? They're like, oh yeah, I can take risks, I can do a lot in a game, but once I have real life consequences attached to that, ooh, that's scary. I'm not going to move forward. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. What would you say to those people?
I think that what I would initially say, especially when it comes to, compare and contrast, is, well, what would you do in that scenario and how would you step back and be able to rebuild from there, right? So, yes, this is not going to be a trial and error. However, if you are scared in order to move forward because, may, for example, in a relationship or anything like, you need to recess that, right? So you need to reflect. Look at all the experience that you've had. And so, in fact, because I am a student and marriage and family therapist, I have some gamers as clients. And we sometimes use, metaphors from video games in saying, look, you're right now trying to beat something that is a level 50 and you're at only level 15. Where would you need to do in order for you to be able to battle or be able to challenge that more effectively? So for people who are saying, well, yes, video gaming, I don't have much of a risk. If in real life you feel that there is a risk, okay, well, what tools and what resources do you have in case it does blow up in your face for you to be able to rebuild again in your own sense? You may not have that opportunity again, But you may have another opportunity because when one door closes, another one opens. And it even happens in video games. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have an opportunity again to pick back up right there and then. It means that you might have another pathway to go in there because you might not go through the same door, right? So I think ultimately you have to really take a deep look at it that even though, yes, you do get to lose and restart again a video game, sometimes even if you do it again in the same way, it's going to give you the same result. It's the same thing in real life. You may have the same result, right? So learn from your mistakes, learn from what you do have, and sometimes accept the fact that if you do fail and it does end up happening, radical acceptance and learning that it is what it is. You don't have to like it, but it just happened that way and it might just flow that way naturally. So it's okay to accept your faults. Remember, mistakes are feedback. They're not an implication of who you are. It's just feedback for you to know if in another opportunity you might get that back. You might be in another relationship where you get to actually now, okay, I remember this. I remember this was happening. This is how I approached it last time. I was very reactive. I was really impulsive. Maybe this time I need to really have a decent conversation or even have a more open dialogue with my partner in order for me to be able to get to the source of the issue. Sometimes I think we tend to internalize that we are the problem when in fact it's behaviors and the situation that's really causing an issue in our relationships than necessarily us as being the problem because we can always change.
Exactly right. So we can always change, we can always learn and grow, and especially learning from our mistakes. And I think, and what I saw with my own experience too is like, yeah, you don't want to do the trial and error for yourself, for your life, because that's, and there's definitely been a few areas in my life where that's been the case, where it's just like, man, this isn't working. But I think one of the great things about life, what we see outside of gaming as well, is just, being able to try different things in games, great. But being able to see and learn from others, right? Because like if you can go online and you can watch videos on how people have done certain things, well, guess what? It's not 100%, but there's a lot of that in life too, where you can learn from other people's mistakes, right? So
That's
other people
true.
have done this. The other people have, whether it's, starting your own business and certain things that you do, whether it's, marketing or whether in finance, whatever it is, there's a lot of things that have been done and a lot of things that have been done by different people in different industries and different areas. And some of it is just understanding what works and what doesn't. We do this in games. It's called looking it up. Back in the day, we called it strategy guides, right?
Game facts.
Game facts, yep, they're still around too. That's
They're
crazy.
still around. Yes, they are.
So if it's just simply looking at a guide, looking at a video, looking at a tutorial, we have those in life, right? They're called
Absolutely.
mentors, coaches, they're called, friends, colleagues, whatever it is. And sometimes they're on YouTube too, where you can learn from other people's mistakes. So I absolutely love that because that's where you don't have to do the trial and error, right? You
You
can
don't.
shortcut the mistakes by learning from others, right?
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to learning what you have and just needing and seeing what resources in your toolkit, right? If you have YouTube at your disposal and you can go and research, you can definitely see what somebody's done and then make it your own if you want to make it your own or follow through like I got like and that's why I mentioned GameFAQs because it was a full-on walkthrough. And how many pages was that? Like 16 pages of clicking and clicking and clicking and having to check exactly where you're at. But you have these resources, you have these tools, you can always be self-aware and always prepare yourself for whatever comes. The end result will be the end result because of what it is. We don't control how other people feel or how other people react, but we can definitely have control about how we feel and how we react. So I think that that ultimately gives you a sense of control that even as if the outcome isn't at your favor, this is something you wanted necessarily, well, you can sit with it and say, you know what, I did the best that I could with what I had in my toolkit, in my resource list. And if it ever comes back again, if I'm able to be given another opportunity, like a second job or, a second a trial at being married or in a relationship or, wanting to talk to a friend or a family member, maybe just because some relationships ends doesn't mean they can not be picked up again and rebuild. So I think that that's something that sometimes we kind of tend to ignore, but we do have the opportunity. We do get a reset. Unbeknownst to us, it's also up to us to be able to allow that reset to happen, because people change. They change on their own accord, and some people just don't, and that's okay too.
Yep. And what you had mentioned, I think so powerful as far as focusing on what you can control. Right. And that is so huge. And I just want to echo that point for those listening too, because focusing on what you can control is really the key. Because I think there's so many people that get distracted, I'll call it, by focusing on the things they can't control. And yes, there's certain things that we wish were better, right? Whether it is politics or the economy or the weather, right? There's things that we see that are just either inconvenience or upsetting, and it's just like at some point it's just negative focus. And it's like if we can
Mhm.
focus on the things that we can control, and I'd say even making sure you go that additional level to say like, well, even if it's something for your own business, you're like, well, okay, well, I'll focus on sales. I'll focus on
Mhm.
the amount that I'm selling. It's like, well, what you just mentioned, right? You can't control how people feel. You can't control how they're going to react. You can only control what you can do. So I've noticed like for those that are managing their own business, the successful people, they're like, oh, we don't, especially initially, we don't manage or we don't like they measure it, they track it, but they don't like accurately or actively pursue sales as their number, as their metric. It's like,
Mhm.
because I can't control that. I can't control whether they
Mhm.
say yes or not. What I can control is how many people I talk to. I can control how many times I send out marketing messages or content. I can
Mhm.
control how many times I offer, right? So all these things that you can measure that you can control. And suddenly you'll see a lot more progress because you're like, oh, well, if it's something I can control, I know it can repeat it. And there's a certain amount of like, result that'll happen from that. It's like, yes, you want the sale, yes, you want the business, whatever it is, but that's a result. And you need to focus on
Mhm.
the actual action that you can control, right?
Absolutely. I can totally agree with you 100% because I think that in most cases, a lot of us tend to get lost in the result, as you mentioned previously, or at the outcome of things,
Yep.
but then we don't really take a step back and say, well, what is within my realm of control? And one of the I want to just kind of throw it out there as a marriage and family therapist. One of the models that we use is something called the locus of control. So if anybody ever wants to go ahead and go into Google, search it, it's called the locus of control, where there's external and internal control. So external control is kind of the things that you mentioned, politics, the weather, things that, our churches, things the way society kind of like builds themselves, people talking, negatively about you. Those are things that are external. And when we think about it externally, we're only thinking about the things that we cannot control because we don't have a say or thing. We can yell, scream, and try to put our voice out there. But here's the thing, when we start to think of it internally and we really think about I can control my behavior, I can control my thoughts, and I can control what I say and do, then in that case it's a different perspective. A really great example is kind of like when you're about to study for a test. Now, an external person would say, well, what would be the point of me being able to study because I know that that test is really hard and everybody fails it on the first time. So, you know what? I'm just not going to do it, right? That's thinking externally. Internally is saying, well, I may not control what the result is going to be. I may or may not be able to, pass the test, but I'm going to put a little more effort into studying because that's something I can control. How much I dedicate in time and how much I'm willing to put in and invest into it in order to get the ideal or more optimal desire. Now, you may fail the test anyway, but here's the thing, you learn something from it and say, okay, I may have studied for a long time. I know I did that, but maybe there's something that I didn't understand, or maybe I didn't be able to comprehend. And getting that feedback back from failing actually is much more beneficial than necessarily if you pass it the first
I completely agree. I think that and that last part, the learning from failure too, right? It's this
time.
we definitely learn from failure a lot more than we learn from success sometimes, right? It's like, well, success is just kind of, well, it worked, move on. And it's like failure is like, oh, I need to change something and improve. And like,
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot more focus that goes on to that. So
Absolutely,
absolutely love that.
100%.
Great. So as we wind down this particular episode for Game Your Future, I want to make sure that we cover as much as we can because there's so much great information here. So and I almost want to leave it there, but I do want to ask, what is there anything that we're forgetting, right? What is the one thing that you have noticed, whether in your career or as a gamer, that we have not talked about so far that you wanted to give as kind of advice for gamers?
So I think the last thing that I would like to go ahead and chime in there is to not forget about some self-care. Gaming can be self-care. Sure, we're very busy with our daily lives and we are able to go ahead and, do the grind and having to be able to provide for our families. But video gaming, I believe, also gives us a sense of, self-care, being able to kind of give ourselves an opportunity to shut down a little bit for something, not thinking everything. I mean, for me, that's basically Animal Crossing. It's the time when I get to sit there and just be like, "Du-du-du-du-du." It's not it's not going to be the high stakes game like I'm going to play a Souls game or Demon Souls or something like that where I'm not going to be stressed. It's going to be a game that I just kind of sit there and be able to just kind of mind my own business, look at the cute little dresses and all of this stuff. And it's also a self-care tactic. It's also a tool that you can definitely use in order after a really hard day be able to come down and just even play video games that like farming and everything. The cozy games are actually okay as well to do. I think that sometimes we forget about that. I think a lot of people just associate with video gaming with like high stakes, like, GTA or having to do a strategy game, or you're always like, or even the fighting games, like having to play
Oh,
Street Fighter and playing it competitively. Like it's always high stakes when it doesn't necessarily always have to be. I think recently it's actually gone trending where a lot of girls and a lot of other creators have actually leaned into the cozy games as well as saying, hey, this is a storytelling. This is just me wanting to sit there. A lot of indie games are actually leaning into that. And I think that that's okay. I actually do always encourage some of my clients to say, if you can sit down, if you like to read a book and you want to engage in something that's going to keep you a little bit more kind of awake, because I tend to sleep sometimes when I read a book, you want to get engaged, pick up a video game, pick up a Switch. It's okay to pick up a Switch once in a while. It doesn't mean that you're going to be on there all the time, but you can sit down, relax, be on your couch for a little bit and just enjoy the ride and enjoy the story and sometimes get to move your character around and see how cute it is and give yourself
yeah.
an opportunity to breathe.
And how telling is it, right? That when the lockdown, when COVID did happen, that I know it just came out, but Animal Crossing blew up, right? Because I think a lot of people were stressed because there was a lot of uncertainty around it, and it's just like, hey, how about just a little cozy game to hang out with your friends? Like people didn't tell a lot of stories about like, oh, we're in lockdown. Well, I guess I'll go play Dark Souls 5 different times. You're like, no. Animal Crossing was the game. You're like,
It
so it's
was.
starting to make sense here. Okay,
Yeah,
fantastic.
absolutely.
So much fun. Well, thank you so much, Betty. So for those that want to connect with you, where can people learn more and find out more about you?
Well, I thank you so much, Daniel. This was very insightful. I want to just give a shout out to you for allowing me to be a part of this
Well, thank you.
podcast. Thank you so much for letting me be here. But if anybody wants to plug in, I actually Twitch stream. The tag name is Yukio Najima, and I also am on Instagram as well as Yukio Najima. And you're more than welcome to hit me up on there. It's also on Discord if anybody wants to go ahead and reach out to me. I'm more than welcome to always lend an ear.
Fantastic. So we'll definitely have the links for you guys in the description. Definitely check out Betty, aka Yukio Najima, Twitch and Instagram. So gosh, so much fun. So thank you so much, Betty. And before you
No,
go,
thank you.
we did have one more question.
Sure.
And that question is, we've mentioned a few, but if you had to pick one, what is your favorite video game?
It has to be Final Fantasy VIII.
Final Fantasy VIII.
In
There it
fact,
is.
all Final Fantasies. Just a really quick tip, if anybody
Yeah.
doesn't know me, and a lot of you do know already about me, both of my daughters have Final Fantasy game character names legally.
Oh, that's good. I'll say yeah, no kids, but my cat is named after a Final Fantasy character as well. So
Really? Ah, hey, we're on the same page.
we're on the
I
same
go.
page, right? So, absolutely love the Final Fantasy series as well. So yeah, Final Fantasy VIII, huge. Oh my gosh, they're all so good, right? So yeah,
They
fantastic. I
are.
love that answer because I'm a big Final Fantasy fan myself. So fantastic. So guys, this has been Betty, Yukio Najima, and definitely check her out. Connect Instagram, Twitch, and gosh, it's been so much fun. Thank you so much, Betty. And for those
Thank
listening,
you.
for those watching, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, stay awesome and I'll see you in the next one.
Hey.